What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Taking the Pin. And today we're going to be discussing a pretty hot topic at the minute, and that is who is the third man in Seth Rollins' brand new Paul Heyman guy faction, whatever it's being called. They don't have a name yet, but that may be because we don't have the third person. So today, me and Bragster are going to go through some of our picks. We've got a few names written down, so we're going to go through one at a time. We may cross over on some of them. It's highly likely that we will, but it's still good to theorize and get going with that. So, of course, we've had a couple interactions now with, Sammy, Jay, and CM Punk, and of course, Seth and Bron. Last night's Raw, there was an attack on Jay in the background, and obviously there was confrontation at the start of the show. But it's very much a kind of, they're outnumbered at the minute, so they need someone. So, Bragster, with that little bit of an introduction, give us your first name.
Okay, I've got three up. Obviously, we've got a few. I've got my main three, and I'm gonna sort of sandwich my less likely one in the middle. One person who I think not only would be great, I feel like possibly needs it, and is getting called up to the main roster very, very shortly, and that's Ethan Page. I feel like All Ego Ethan Page would be magnificent in this group. That you've got there's that similarities with Seth in funnily enough the ego, the fact that I am the best, and I feel like thinking all the way down the road, obviously that could be where tensions sort of form elsewhere with that side, but also that is a perfect reason as to why him and Seth would get on, because Seth would have this vision. And Ethan Page is the sort of person that would see it. His whole character, it makes sense. You wouldn't have to change Ethan Page. That's one of the best things about Bron Breakker coming into the group is you haven't had to change him one bit. I think with Ethan Page, you would not have to change. He would slot straight in. No one would bat an eyelid. And I think it elevates somebody. You would then have a faction of Seth being the main eventer, Bron being the established mid-carder / upper mid-carder already that then is elevated to that main event scene. And then you've got Ethan Page, who a lot of the casuals may not know, who would then be elevated to a whole new level in terms of being associated with these people and being on the same page, in the same ring with, Punk, Jay, Sammy, and whoever else they end up feuding with in the future. And when Ethan Page eventually proves himself in the ring, is in the moment he's put in that limelight and people go, wait a minute, he can hang with the best people, his stock will just rise and rise and rise. I feel like Ethan Page is a perfect person for this group.
Yeah, 100%. And again, he's one of the three names I've got written down. Just for everything you said and then some. I think you look at his line of work, wherever he's been, whatever promotion he's been in, I think, like you say, with him very likely coming up soon, it kind of makes all the sense in the world that he would be one of those obvious picks. There's not really a lot more I can add to it, really. I think you put that quite perfectly. So in terms of my pick, or one of my picks, I guess, that I wrote down, I went with Drew McIntyre. The reason being is I feel like obviously Drew has a history with everybody that they're currently feuding with.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a history with a lot of people at this point, but he has a history with everybody that they're feuding with at the moment. He kind of has a similar sort of stance to what Seth and Co does. And in all honesty, I would kind of just like Drew to work with Paul Heyman and just see what that dynamic's like, because I get the feeling like it's not necessarily that it'd be a Brock where Paul's sort of fearing him, but it's kind of that power dynamic where Drew's really the one in charge, but Paul's the one pulling the strings for him, basically. Similar to what he'll be doing with Bron and Seth. But also with Drew, I do feel like he needs another story to go on, or another start to a story to go on, and I feel like this would be a pretty good way to do that. Because again, I've enjoyed what we've seen. I enjoy everything that I see of Drew. That's kind of a silly statement, but obviously this Damian Priest thing isn't going to be going on for too much longer, and it's kind of like, where do you go from there? Is he going to be in Money in the Bank again? Quite possibly, unless they're going to do a big feud payoff at Money in the Bank with him and Damon, which is quite possible. Unless they're both in the ladder match, of course. That's always something they like to do. But yeah, I do think Drew would be a good fit. And again, you would just, having him in, I think would add an aura of invincibility to the group, which I think is, with the two that they've got, is kind of almost there. But with a big, massive badass like Drew, I could see that happening.
No, 100%. You know, we've already seen interactions as well with Heyman and Drew. We had that infamous one where they revealed the cover star, obviously being Roman, and Drew coming out and doing this warning, and you can see the fear on Heyman's face.
Yeah.
And I just really like that. I really like the fact that maybe you could argue that led to this sort of thing. You know, Heyman realizing that, you know, he's a huge asset, because I feel like if Drew is to make it into this group, it would be more of a Heyman decision than a Seth decision, because Seth and Drew obviously have their history.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could play off that really well, where in feuds you could have the baby faces being like, can you really trust him?
Yeah.
He tried to kill you like last year.
Yeah.
What's going on? And you can have that power dynamic, and you can also have that little tiny bit of tension with Seth and Heyman, in the fact that I don't trust him. You can be like, I don't trust Drew, but I trust your decisions because you're the wise man. And you know, there's so many layers that you can add to it. I've seen this theorized a lot online as well, and I feel like Drew is someone who needs, as you said, direction. This would give him direction. Does this per se maybe put him into the main event title picture? No, which a lot of people would like. But if you don't have plans for him in the title picture, and you need something to distract people, make people not think about the fact that he's not in the title picture, this is a perfect way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got Ethan Page, Drew McIntyre, Bragster. Who have you got up next?
I mean, this is my least likely option on my list, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, it would work. He is currently a champion, so which is why it would be more difficult. But Ricky Saints, I think, would be brilliant. I think, again, the whole ego thing, the whole, like, I'm the best. And I think there's some really good comparisons you can maybe make to Seth a little bit in Ricky Saints that just works. And we know WWE care about Ricky. We know they want to rise him to the moon. And what a better way to do it than to put him in this faction, you know, where you can have Ricky sort of shine. As we know, he's extremely good in the ring. We saw it in AEW, where, you know, he's had so many great matches. And then you can then do the same here. You can have him perform with the best. You can then have his stock rise because of that. Also, Ricky is a very good person to lose matches and not lose momentum. And I feel like this group right now kind of needs someone like that. Someone that can sort of be that body that gets pinned a lot, but then you don't realize it's happening just because they're like so low in comparison to the stock of everyone else that they're being elevated just by being in the ring with them.
Yeah.
I feel like Ricky's that person, and it's my least likely option because he's doing some great stuff on NXT, and there seems to be a story ready made for him to just rise through NXT. But if they want to strap that rocket to him and just go, do you know what? We can't think, we're not really sure on anyone on the main roster. You sort of fit, have him drop the title and go straight up, or have him have the title for a little bit and have the NXT title on the main roster for a month or so before Ricky drops it. I think there's multiple good options as to why Ricky would make such a good member of this faction.
Yeah, 100%. And I quite like the thought of maybe both Ricky and Ethan at the same time and being like a tag team duo a little bit, and sort of, you know, because some of these factions you've obviously seen through history, there's like, you've got your two main guys, or you sort of, like you say, Seth's the top guy, Bron's the middle guy, and then there's usually a couple below where they're like the tag team sort of thing, and a bit of the battering rams. And I kind of like that Ethan Ricky combo, especially with the cockiness that they would bring to it. I think that would be quite funny to see and quite cool to see, actually. So speaking of cocky, good segue. We'll go on to sort of my last pick, who I'd thought about, and I've mentioned this to you before. Now, again, I think there's a few things that would have to maybe change a little bit, but I would potentially look at Logan Paul.
Interesting.
Now, the reason being is when people have obviously said, "Is this like a new evolution sort of thing?" I was thinking like of maybe like a Randy Orton cocky sort of knows he's as good as he is and can do everything that he says he can do. And there isn't many people, and now obviously we've just talked about Ricky and we've talked about Ethan Page, and they would fit that bill perfectly. But I think Logan Paul, with a bit of mentorship, with obviously Paul Heyman in his corner, with the guidance of Seth, I think could be a really, really interesting development and a really interesting layer to that story. I think on his own, as he's been, yes, his matches have proved that he can hang with anybody in the ring, and I don't really see that as an issue. That's not really where I have my issues with Logan. My issues with Logan's are on the mic, character, story progression, that sort of thing. And I feel like this sort of faction would be a good thing to sink his teeth into and for him to learn the craft a bit more. Now, saying that, I do think there's a couple of things that they'd have to sort of work out and move past. Like, he would have to be there week in, week out to be in that faction, because it's obviously going to be a huge part of the next year or maybe few years going forward. We don't know, obviously, how long this is going to be a thing, but when Heyman's involved, it looks like it's going to be a long-term thing. So, yeah, there's obviously a few things that have to work out, but I do think in terms of you're looking for not necessarily an up-and-comer. I don't think I can't categorize him as an up-and-comer when he's been in the company for a few years now. But for someone who obviously has those next couple of levels to go to, I think this would be a perfect fit for him, because he could. Everybody hates him already. He's got the cockiness down to a T. He knows he is as good as he is, and we all know it, and that's why we hate him, because it's just annoying that he's as good as he is. And it does feel like a big opportunity for someone coming in from the outside who's not necessarily been in wrestling to kick on and be in that sort of main event at some point. And this would kind of be a perfect step up without it feeling forced or shoehorned or anything like that. So, yeah, lots of consideration on that one. But, yeah, Logan Paul would probably be one of my last picks.
Yeah, I think he's a good option. As you said, a lot of things have to fall into place, but you can make it work. You know, WWE is a lot about making viral moments and about social media clicks and stuff like that. And one person who guarantees that every single time he's on screen is Logan Paul. Doesn't matter whether he's even in the caption. If people catch a whiff that he's in the video, people will watch it. Yeah. Whether they are fans of his or haters of his, you watch his stuff because you either love to hate him or you just love him in general. Exactly. And that's the beauty of Logan Paul, and Triple H is someone that has understood that he has an absolute gold mine in Logan Paul here. And again, if someone who has lacked sort of direction, I feel like it's going to get to a point where Logan Paul having a feud, then the babyface turning around and going, but you're just a YouTuber. And then him going, but have you not seen the stuff I can do in the ring? Eventually is going to get old. It just will. Right now, it hasn't, because as you said, he hasn't been on screen as much, this, that, and the other. But sooner rather than later, that same story is going to get old unless you add depth to his character. This could be a way you add depth to his character. Whether that be he doesn't get the job done against Jay, looks a bit lost, and Heyman or Seth pulls him aside and goes, you join us, you'll be on top of the world, even if you don't have that title. Yeah. And you can tell that sort of story very, very easily. But as you said, he has to be on screen a lot. He has to be willing to sort of drop a couple of the things that is his character right now, partly maybe drop a couple of the Prime stuff as heavily as he's doing it, and just have it as a sponsorship on the show and not really reference it as much, which I know would probably lose a bit of money. It's a give and take scenario, but I think it can work. And if Logan wants to prove himself that he can do something a bit different and isn't one-dimensional that maybe some people call him as being, this is a perfect way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I can see it. Like with all the picks that we've discussed, I can just see them stood on the stage, walking down to the ring all together, and obviously doing the thing. So yeah, definitely Logan Paul's on that list. So Bragster, take us through your final pick.
My final pick is my sauciest pick.
Oh, right, okay.
And one that I think, if you want to replicate the Shield, if you want to replicate Seth having his own little protege or whatever it is, the perfect man and the only man to do that is Nathan Fraser.
Right.
The perfect. Everyone compares him to Seth Rollins. Everyone does. Everyone goes, this reminds me of Seth Rollins 10, 15 years ago when he debuted. And you've teased the whole Axiom Nathan Fraser split for so long. If they want to do it, have Fraser drop Axiom to join another faction, to go and team with someone else and have that man's heart break. Have Axiom's heart completely shatter. Also, inadvertently, raises the stock of Axiom when Axiom goes and starts teaming with the Jays, the Punks of the world, and the Sammys, and ends up in those tag matches. You technically elevate two people at the same time, and Nathan Fraser is someone who is magnificent, possibly doesn't even need this necessarily.
Yeah.
But if Fraser is someone on their radar to rise quickly, he is the perfect man to do it, And just before recording, I was thinking, who in the tag division sort of needs this? If you were to rip them from their tag team, because we see it so many times with factions before where they're already in a tag team and they get almost like poached, per se. Nathan Fraser is the perfect man to be poached. That is like a story ready-made. It's already written. They've teased stuff for so long, it's already written. All the comparisons to Seth, this, that, and the other. The promo there of, you remind me of me, and I want to make you the next me, and you can dominate the industry when I'm gone. All of these things, perfect. Absolutely perfect. Already ready-made. And I feel like it would, out of all the options that we have said, that's the biggest shocker. That would be the one that actually creates, for me, this big boom on social media, the whole internet wrestling community going mental, because it would be one of their most beloved tag teams completely imploding for the rise of Nathan Fraser.
Yeah.
And I just think that it's similar to a couple of my other picks where it's like they could lose and they still will gain stock. Again, Nathan Fraser's that man. I just think, for me, if I was to pick someone right now, Nathan Fraser is the one I would desperately want. I'm not sure they will do it or have the balls to do it, because I think it would take a lot of balls to just absolutely strap the rocket to him and implode one of your most popular tag teams.
Yeah.
But I think it's, in terms of storyline-wise, almost like the perfect choice.
Yeah. And it's weird. I can see the vision of it, like, we all putting it across. But I can also see, in a weird way, I'm not necessarily saying they're going to call it this, but I could see it almost being like a Shield 2.0, where you've got Ethan, Ricky, Nathan, and then all of a sudden, like, obviously this is way down the line in the storyline, but then the four of them, including Bron, just look at Seth and go, we don't need you anymore, get out, and like kick him out, and then you go from there.
You could easily do that. And, have it, rather than the implosion the way we're expecting, which is just Bron going on his own.
Yeah.
You could almost have, not necessarily Bron become the leader, but this moment where they all go, actually, we don't need you anymore, or we don't even need the faction anymore, but they all team up to be like, no, stuff you, Seth, we're sick of you, and then they all go their separate ways.
Yeah.
You know, there's an easy way to tell that story. You know, and the whole thing of it being Seth's shield,
Yeah.
as you said, like rather than the shield, it's Seth's shield.
Yeah.
You know, he mentioned with the Cody thing, he was the shield to Cody. He's then making his own shield so he can stay on top. Is a very clever move. I don't think they should call it that, or I don't think they should only ever reference it like that, where he goes, "I've built my shield," but it's never actually called the shield, but it's just referenced like that. I think would be
100%.
really, really cool.
Yeah, 100% it would be. And time will tell if any of these picks actually come to fruition, because, again, it's looking like Saturday night's main event is going to be a tag match between Punk, Zayn, and Bron and Seth. Could we see that surprise third hype man, I guess you want to call him, or member of the faction come in? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, we'll leave it there, folks. If you have enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like. Let us know down in the comments. Do you have any other picks, or do you have a particular pick that you want to see in the faction? It would be lovely to know. And as always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we will catch you on the next one, where, of course, we'll be discussing all things wrestling.